Manga adaptations are the most popular basis for creating an anime, right above VNs, video games, light novels, and actual original content. And with creating adaptations, you make it usually having in mind that you want to make it somewhat reflect the content you were given in the first place. Yet there are times in which it turns out like a quick, easy cash grab in order to bank in on fans who are looking forward to seeing their beloved manga in the small screen. And while I personally have not read the full manga of Tokyo Ghoul, I've skimmed over it and read other people's thoughts of how well it actually adapted. They all say it was rushed and a very poorly made rendition of what the manga had to offer. And the anime actually goes away from the manga some too, which just because an anime strays off from the manga doesn't mean it's inherently bad. Just look at FMA, which, while it in my opinion doesn't live up to the manga, it in no way is bad. So it's possible to make a good adaptation that strays off from the manga. Yet this time, I feel the show does not live up to its full potential in the slightest. Yet today I am reviewing this as a show and nothing else, acting on as though the manga never existed. So let's get into my review of Tokyo Ghoul. The show starts out with a decent concept. A boy named Ken Kaneki lives in a world of ghouls, beings that look like humans yet have to eat people in order to stay alive. Well, they hate regular food yet love them some Starbucks. But one day, Ken was thinking he was about to get lucky with a girl he had his eyes on. Turns out she was a ghoul. And after a string of events that leave her dead and him gaining her organs, he is now turned into a half-ghoul, half-human hybrid. And this is where the show handles the concept of the inner beast versus the human pretty well. We see him struggle with the pain of turning into this ghoul and avoiding eating humans, which his human side drives him away from, yet his ghoul side drives him to do it. And this can show the balance and insecurities as humans have their temptations on one side yet have another that will want to do the opposite. And for the first 2 episodes, it does this well, getting a look and understanding of how having this beast take control can have an effect on one's psyche. Yet past this, the story then just goes into a breeze, coasting through almost everything. He soon joins a peaceful group of ghouls that gets food in a different way from their formal killing and murdering humans. Yet from here on, the story draws into a direction where it jumps from one point to another, from a psychotic ghoul that's obsessed with wanting to eat Ken to these detectives that are assigned to killing ghouls. And it just breezes through each of these plot points, drawing no real connection to each other, and just throwing in characters to help progress the plot and then throwing them out to never be used again or in a useful way. And the biggest flaw I found is how the show does very little to answer questions about the world that they actually live in, and only to add on to the questions over time, such as where the ghouls came from. Are they just natural beings? And many other questions along those lines. Yet even with these problems, the story is nonetheless enjoyable to watch the first season, especially if you don't care for the manga, which it throws in enough emotion, action, and beautiful music, and an actual enjoyable, why not fully satisfying finale to which make it worth a watch. Yet I can't say that about the second season, which, with all the problems that the first had, this has even more and amplifies a lot of the ones from the first season. And it tramples on with no real focus at all, with throwing in a slur of new characters that you never grow to really care about, only a few that you might grow a small attachment to from the first season into this one. And the characters then face these events with no real explanation to why they're happening. Why are we here? Because the writer said so. What the fuck? And then the entire latter half of the season happens because one insignificant character with literally zero purpose in the rest of the show just appears and shoves the show into a slur of plot, which could have probably been done in a much better way because it was going to happen. It's just done in kind of a forced way. And any morality and questions that the first season brought up is kind of thrown out. The only emotional aspects this show tries to build on in the second season is going into many scenes that tried to build these emotional tones for these characters, yet never quite hits it well enough, due to either generic development or motivation, or overall no development at all. And these points are even made more jarring in the finale, which I felt honestly aesthetically and OST wise was beautiful, setting up a moment that in general will be very emotional, yet again doesn't quite hit home that hard, due to how the show unfolds itself throughout. The way a lot of writers and shows that I feel are rushed try to get you to attach to a character and to show their development, well, development in quotes, is by showing them 1 or 2 times. They have one action towards somebody to shock you a little bit, and then they spew a few lines to really get you to understand who they are. And then you're obviously attached to them, instead of doing it the real way by showing backstory, showing real actions that were affected by events happened before in their life and then in the future. And that's what this show doesn't do. They take the shortcut. The main cast, if you want to call them that, overall has no real purpose throughout, while the MC isn't the most standout guy, somewhat generic at the beginning, has promised by the end of the first season to turn in a more moralistic character that doesn't whine and cry all the time, that will actually do something. And well, that overall fails horribly in the second season. He honestly becomes almost whinier, and at times we just never hear from him at all. There are only a few other characters that get any really prominence character progression wise, such as Toka, who kind of a stubborn girl who grows to care for the others at this coffee shop through a bout of events that overall end up with her just running through the streets, lost like the rest of her character development. While an enjoyable character throughout, she doesn't end the best. So even the characters that have purpose in the show feel like they were given a weekend for the most part. And the rest of the cast has no real pertinence, and they are thrown in and thrown out like they are nothing. And if you're lucky, you might learn a few things about them, but very rarely did something actually come of it, or from that character. And by the end of the show, we see nothing from them, who they became, other than Toka, and in general, we don't really learn why most of anyone acts the way they do. But a few characters in the police force did get a reason for their actions. Revenge, which after time loses its meaning due to the fact that the revenge they seek is for a character who we also learn very little to nothing about. Also, to point out, these police are very incompetent in this show, which is kind of annoying at times. I could go on to this topic for hours. They handle the characters with the least bit of respect and just assume that you feel and care for them over a few emotional lines. Characters are not grown through this. You have to see them go through things that actually have pertinence and a true understanding of how the story at hand and their past events have on them. And while some characters in the show have their moments, they're usually handled poorly, being that they're rushed, or you never fully see the events and how they affect the character as a whole, or in general they just weren't developed enough before to have it have an impact in the end. And I feel its biggest problem is the fact that everything was rushed. The show has the pieces here to make something that could have been a very strong and emotional tension that builds, but ends up being a confusing, illogical mess. As for the music and art, like the rest of the show, it starts out strong animation-wise, but soon just falls into feeling rushed and honestly bad at times, seeing mistakes at certain points that I've never seen in anime before, and in general lacking detail or depth. Art-wise, character designs are nice to look at, but nothing that will blow anyone away. But color palette-wise, it is a mix between bright and lively and very dark and brooding, which fits well, being that when at the coffee shop, that is their place of home and safety, so it is filled with warm and calming colors. And in general, when they need a deep, dark, and meaningful moment, the art and the colors really come through to set the mode of either desperation, revelation, or sadness or anger, and does this very well. There is also the matter of censorship. While the version of the show that I watched had very little of it, and many other versions other than DVDs and Blu-rays I believe will have, in my opinion, a lot of unneeded censorship, such as a giant magical black beam that morphs over bodies. Wow, I didn't know dead bodies look like that. Or in general, things are just blurred for some reason, and I'm just curious to what is the point of doing this to a show that is 50% gore, maybe even more. And most people are probably going to know going into this through the first episode that there's going to be this kind of gore. And this kind of censorship is just going to be jarring to the viewer and pull them out of the situation at hand. So be aware for censorship of this show. Music-wise, is this show's saving grace, especially for many scenes that without it would not have hit at all, in more impactful moments. We hear a powerful yet soft chorus singing while subtle pianos play. And other songs have the orchestra playing symphonic tones that make any scene more prominent than it may actually have been. And it is the strongest point of the series. As for the OP and EDs, the only one I cared for was the first OP, which I believed was the band that did the Psychopath's first opening. And like theirs, this is also a strong yet alluring rock song, while the second OP was a slow jazz, somewhat trippy song that isn't bad, but didn't catch me like the first did. In the animation overall, it's just kind of beautiful, yet didn't do much for me to get me ready for the episode. Ending 1 is more of a hard down and more brooding rock song, while the second is a light sounding rock song, which nothing that really stood out to me as a whole. Truthfully, while watching through this show, there were only a few times I actually found myself enjoying the show as a whole, largely being moments in the first season lying into the beginning few episodes, and then the last few episodes of that season. The rest of the series was overall another example of a studio taking advantage of a popular manga and wanting to get it out there as soon as possible to make that money. Overall, I might say give it a watch for the first season and just act like it ended there, even if there was a sort of cliffhanger leading toward a second season. But if you don't like watching half a series, then pass on the series as a whole. Nonetheless, other shows that I would give a watch that would be similar to, and most likely better, would be Parasite. While I have not actually seen it, it does have a somewhat similar premise in the sense that the MC is a hybrid between a human and sort of monster-like being, and this show also contains a ton of gore, which might be something you like. Then Attack on Titan, which honestly it's hard to not have heard of it, but it is a brutal anime about survival of the human race against another supernatural being, with also a few other similarities that you will find as you go through the show. And then lastly, I feel Mirror, which gives off the more dark, brooding feeling, but a character who is thrown into a world where he has to learn to accept what he has been placed in. But that is it for my review of Tokyo Ghoul. This is probably one of the first animes where I have been distinctly hard on the show, but I am just trying to really help prove to you why I believe a show is worth or isn't worth watching. Otherwise, I hope you all enjoy, and don't forget to punch that like button if you enjoyed, and I'll see you all next time. Peace out.